I experienced this toward the end of 2023. I was looking for a place no one really went. I wanted to disappear for a few days, to be alone. Crowded campsites were the last thing I wanted. So I got the camper ready. It wasn't a great RV, secondhand old, but it did the job. Inside, there was a small bed, a mini kitchen, and a single ceiling fan that barely worked. Don't expect too much comfort, I told myself. Comfort wasn't my priority anyway. While searching for a suitable place, I came across a strange thread on an old outdoor forum. There was only one message. The person hadn't shared a map link. They simply wrote that the place was in Washington, at the end of a forest road, in a small clearing. This isn't a popular spot. Please pick up your trash. I'm not marking this on the map. That was when I realized I was intrigued. The fact that it wasn't on any map, even though it made no sense, pulled me in. The next day, I set out in the afternoon. When I turned off the main road onto the forest road, the first thing I noticed was that it wasn't completely abandoned. The dirt road was damaged in places. There were potholes, and tire tracks ran along the edges. Some were softened by rain, others still sharp. It was hard to tell how old they were. It felt like different people had used this road at different times, but who they were or why was unclear. After a while, my phone lost reception. I drove a bit farther. The trees began to thin out, and at the very end of the road, I reached a small clearing. Just as the forum described, pine and cedar trees surrounded it, with enough space for a single vehicle to pull in and stop. It was exactly what I had been looking for. I backed the camper into a flat spot and parked. The moment I turned off the engine, the forest's silence closed in around me. Crickets, distant birds, the occasional rustle of branches, and a light breeze passing through now and then. When the sun went down, darkness fell faster than I expected. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. From inside the camper, through the windshield, the entire forest road was clearly visible. If anyone entered from that road, the camper would be visible from far away. I hadn't come to a hidden place. On the contrary, I was like a target, placed at the very end of the road. That realization unsettled me. Still, I tried to calm myself. "It's just your imagination," I said. "This is just an ordinary forest road." A few hours later, I saw a brief flash of light on the road ahead. It was faint, fleeting. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. It felt as if a vehicle had appeared, its headlights flashing for just a moment, then disappearing. I stood up immediately and pulled the curtain aside a little more, but the darkness had swallowed everything. No light, no movement. Had it really been there? Or was it just an illusion? I couldn't be sure. At some point, I realized how quiet everything had become. I don't know exactly when it happened, but it wasn't a pleasant feeling. Then I heard it, a short, metallic sound from far away. Unclear, like something closing. Maybe a car door, controlled, unhurried. My body tensed without thinking. I stepped closer to the windshield. As my eyes adjusted, I noticed a dark shape at the end of the road. It could have been a car. There was something there. I couldn't see it clearly, but it was there. I didn't know how long it had been there, but I was sure of one thing. It hadn't been there when I parked. My heart started racing. I stayed where I was, frozen behind the windshield. Nothing happened for a while. Then a shadow moved beside the dark shape. I couldn't see the man clearly. All I could make out was a flashlight in his hand. At first, the beam pointed at the ground from a distance. It moved slowly in a narrow line. Then it came closer, across the ground, the tires, the side of the camper. It felt like he was searching or checking. Suddenly, the beam hit the windshield. The inside of the camper lit up for a split second. I pulled back instinctively, but it was too late. If he had been looking inside at that moment, he would have known someone was there. A few seconds passed. Then came 3 light taps on the camper door. Clear, deliberate, very close. My throat went dry. I stared at the door. I didn't answer. I didn't ask who it was. I didn't turn on the light. I just stood there. Silence. Then 3 loud bangs slammed into the door. The thin metal shook, and in that moment, all the logic I had built inside myself collapsed. I don't know how long it went on, but eventually I heard footsteps, slow, moving away. The flashlight beam lingered on the forest road for a little while longer, then vanished. It seemed to be over. Still, the unease inside me didn't fade. I told myself the vehicle was still there all night. Maybe it left, but it felt safer to believe it hadn't. I stayed inside the camper until morning, gripping a small kitchen knife. Sometimes my eyes closed. Then I'd jolt awake at the slightest sound. Each time I checked the end of the road, half expecting that dark shape to still be there. I knew it was morning when light filled the camper. Slowly I looked outside. There was nothing. I stayed still for a long time. It should have been a moment of relief, but it wasn't. Everything felt too clean, as if the night had left no trace at all. I opened the door. Cold air hit my face, sharp and fresh. The smell of damp earth filled my lungs. I stepped outside. The first place I looked was the end of the road. Empty. My eyes dropped to the ground. I was searching for something, any sign of the night. There was nothing. The road was hard and dry, no mud, no footprints. Maybe it had always been like this, but the doubt wouldn't leave me. I walked around the camper, the tires, the sides. Everything looked normal, until I reached the back. There it was, a fuel can sitting on the ground. I froze. I was certain it hadn't been there before. I had checked the area when I parked. I should have seen it. I bent down and picked it up. It was light. Empty. My mind immediately tried to explain it. Maybe he had come looking for fuel. But then the night replayed itself in my head. The silent approach. The light knocks. The harder bangs. The waiting. Walking around the camper. That wasn't how someone asked for help. Before leaving, I looked back one last time. The clearing was quiet. The forest stood still. But now I knew something I hadn't before. This place wasn't empty. It was just unclear who used it or when. Even days later, the same thought returned to me. Had I done something wrong in that moment? I don't know. I didn't have a plan when I set out on that journey. I just wanted to get away from the city, away from the noise, and spend some time in silence. I hit the road that afternoon. The temperature was below freezing. Snow had built up in the shaded parts of the road, and some stretches were dangerously slippery. When I turned onto the forest road, there wasn't a single vehicle in sight. No pickup trucks, no hunters, not even a couple on a weekend getaway. The silence felt almost uncomfortable. When I reached the campsite, I wanted to get everything done before sunset. I pitched the tent, set out my camping chair, and prepared a small fire pit. For a while, I felt good. Okay, I said to myself. Just one night, I'll leave early tomorrow morning. Before it got completely dark, I took a look around. I didn't go far, just a 2 or 3 minute walk. The forest looked normal. Bare winter branches, dark pine trunks, no lights, no cabins, no distant engine sounds. It felt like the world had forgotten this clearing entirely. Night fell quickly. I sat by the fire for a while, drank coffee from my thermos, and checked my phone. No signal. That was expected. Then I went into the tent. Falling asleep wasn't hard. Exhaustion did the work for me, but I woke up several times during the night. Each time it was the same. The wind tightening the tent fabric, branches rubbing against each other, the occasional snap of a tree limb somewhere in the distance. Every time, I whispered the same thing to myself. Normal. It's just the forest. In the morning, the cold hit my face the moment I unzipped the tent. When I stepped outside, the first thing I noticed was the tracks in the snow. Around the car, boot prints. That was the moment my brain fully woke up. The tracks led from the edge of the campsite to the car. 2 prints in front of the hood, marks circling around the trunk, then a spot beside the driver's door where someone had clearly stood for a long time, as if they had waited there, looking inside the car. I stood still for a moment. My mind immediately reached for the simplest explanations. A hunter, a woodcutter, someone who got lost. But this place was wide open, and it was winter. Who would come here now? I checked the car doors, locked. The windows were fine. The trunk was closed. I looked back at the tent. My things were untouched. The cooler, the food bag, the sleeping bag. Everything was exactly where I left it. There were only the tracks, and the fact that they had lingered. I tried to calm myself. Maybe someone passed through during the night, I said. Maybe they were just curious. Then another thought followed. Curious about what? I forced myself to act normal for the rest of the day. I had breakfast. I didn't pack up the tent. I had planned to stay only one night, but I told myself, since I'm already here. Maybe the real reason was simpler. Leaving right away felt like admitting that the tracks mattered. By afternoon, the weather turned harsher. The clouds darkened. Late in the day, light snow began to fall, first scattered, then steady. I tried to relight the fire, but the wood was damp. It would catch for a moment, crackle briefly, then die out. Darkness. Try again. The second night felt different, not just because of the cold. The forest was quieter. There was no wind at all. That was strange. Wind blends sounds together. Without it, every sound stands on its own. Sitting in my chair, trying to keep the fire alive, I realized I was listening to the darkness itself. The human brain hates emptiness. It tries to make sense of every sound, every shadow. And then, I heard something that wasn't the fire. Footsteps, heavy, irregular. My first thought was animal, a deer, maybe an elk. But the rhythm was wrong. It didn't sound like 4 legs. Sometimes it stopped. Then it started again. And an animal walking on snow would sound softer. This didn't. It sounded like someone who didn't care about being heard. The footsteps continued for a while, then stopped. That didn't comfort me. It made things worse. Because it felt like the sound had stopped, not left. I threw more wood onto the fire. The flames flared up for a moment, and in that brief light, I saw movement among the trees. A shadow. It wasn't approaching. It wasn't hiding. It was standing right at the edge of the light. My throat went dry. I stood up and tried to keep my voice steady. Hello? No immediate response. It felt like it had heard me and chosen not to answer. Then a man stepped out of the darkness. He wore a thick, dark coat. A hat or a hood hid his face. I didn't see a gun, but his hands were buried in his pockets. He didn't come closer. He positioned himself carefully, where the firelight didn't fully reach him, neither fully visible nor completely hidden. His voice was calm, but it wasn't comforting. Camping is prohibited here. My first reaction was to apologize, even though I wasn't sure why. Then I pulled myself together. This is public land, I said. I've camped here in summer. I'm only staying one night. He didn't reply. Instead, he looked around. The car, the tent, my belongings. Then his eyes settled on my face for a moment. It felt like he was memorizing it. Then he spoke again, briefly. It's not a good idea to stay here this season. The crackling fire couldn't fill the silence that followed. I thought about asking questions. Why? Who's out here? But I couldn't bring myself to speak. The man stepped backward. He didn't turn around. Just before disappearing into the trees, he spoke one last time, his voice clearer than before. Leave in the morning. That was when the thought hit me. If I stayed, I might not leave of my own choice. He vanished into the darkness. I remained where I was, not really by the fire, but frozen, as if still under someone's gaze. And in that moment, I understood something clearly. I shouldn't wait for morning. As soon as the sky began to lighten, I put out the fire. Normally, I do this carefully. You never leave a fire unattended. I didn't break that rule. But taking down the tent, untying ropes, folding the mat, those things take time, and time no longer felt safe in that clearing. I grabbed my car keys, zipped up my jacket, and left everything inside the tent exactly as it was. When I reached the car, I stopped. There was a new mark in the snow, one that hadn't been there before. I looked behind me before opening the door. There was no movement among the trees, but that didn't matter. Just because I couldn't see anything didn't mean nothing was there. I got into the car and locked the doors immediately. I put the key in the ignition. When I looked up, my eyes caught the rearview mirror, and I saw him. He was standing by the roadside. Same coat, same posture. He wasn't waving, he wasn't approaching, he wasn't calling out. He was just watching, and I understood. He wanted me to leave. He wanted to see me leave. I slowly drove away. In the mirror, he was still standing there. When I reached the main road, I saw the lights of a gas station in the distance. The moment I saw them, my shoulders dropped. I parked and turned off the engine. For a while, I couldn't let go of the steering wheel. I never told anyone about it. I never said, "There was someone in the woods." I never said, "He threatened me." Because he hadn't. He had only warned me. I didn't go to the police. There was no crime. He hadn't touched me. He hadn't taken anything. He hadn't shown a weapon. He had simply said the right thing. Leave in the morning. I never went back to that clearing. I don't know who that man was. I don't know what he was protecting. But I know this. If I had stayed that night, I wouldn't be telling this story. When I went to this lake, I believed I was completely alone. It was late autumn, but winter was already reminding us that its time had come. During the day, the sun still softened things. At night, it hardened everything. My phone showed no service before I had even left the parking lot. I had downloaded the maps offline. I had a clear plan. 3 days. No one else. Just me, the lake, and the trees. The place sat at the edge of an old hiking trail, a spot still mentioned in forums, but no longer chosen by anyone. A kind of backcountry romanticism. But I had left the romantic part back in town. I wasn't here for romance. I was here for silence. The first day passed without incident. I pitched my tent near the shore, between 2 thick pine trees that blocked the wind. A thin layer of ice had already begun forming along the water's edge. As the sun went down, I lit a fire. Even the crackle of the flames felt strange. Because the forest, this is hard to explain, was too quiet. The first night was peaceful. On the second day, I went inland in the afternoon to gather firewood. I walked a few hundred meters away from the shore. As I bundled the wood under my arm and headed back, I noticed movement on the opposite side of the lake. A man. He was standing near the water on the far shore. He wore a thick, dark jacket like an old work coat, and a beanie pulled down over his head. It fit the weather, maybe even too well. But something was missing. He had no backpack. In this season, in a place this remote, that felt wrong. At least a day pack. Water. Something. Without thinking, I raised my hand. "Hey," I called. No response. I tried again. "Hey, everything okay?" Nothing. He stood there for a few seconds longer, then turned calmly and walked into the trees. He didn't seem to care whether I was there at all. A faint uneasiness crept in, but I brushed it off. Some people in the forest simply don't want to interact. I returned to my tent. I fed the fire. I boiled water. I tried to keep everything normal. But as evening approached, I noticed something else. The sound of the lake had changed. I know the sound of thin ice, quick cracks, sharp pops. What I heard that night was different. Heavier, slower, and worst of all, regular. As if someone were walking along the shore, dropping something into the water, then taking a few steps. Again and again, a rhythm. Not random. I slowly opened the tent zipper just a centimeter and looked out. The lake was a black void. There was no moon. The trees blocked the sky. The orange glow of the fire illuminated a small patch of ice, swallowing everything beyond it. I saw nothing. Then, after a while, a faint sound came from the ice near the shore. Without thinking, I walked to the woodpile and picked up the axe. That night, I drifted in and out of sleep. Each time I woke up, those heavy sounds were either still there or had just stopped. That was the worst part. It felt as though they stopped when I listened and began again when I slept. At first light, I went straight down to the shore. The sun was dull and gray. A thin mist hovered over the lake. The ice near the water's edge was broken. Someone had walked there. As I returned to camp, I noticed something else. The firewood. I always leave it scattered, planning to stack it later. But now, it was neatly piled. I stared at the wood, then at the forest, then back at the wood. My tent zipper was closed. My gear was untouched, but the campsite had been handled. I made a fire and brewed coffee, pretending it was a normal morning. Without realizing it, I listened closely to the forest. The silence was still there, but it was no longer peaceful. Later that afternoon, as the sun dipped low, I looked across the lake. For just a moment, among the trees, I saw a dark silhouette. Brief, uncertain. I don't know whether it was real or my eyes playing tricks on me. At that moment, I made a decision. I would not sleep that night. I lit the fire and sat in front of my tent. My phone still had no signal. I kept my flashlight and knife close. Hours passed. And strangely, that night, the lake was completely silent. That silence felt worse than the noise, because the sounds from the night before were disturbing, but at least they meant something was happening. Near dawn, as the fire burned low, I heard slow, steady breathing somewhere close to the campsite. It was near. I couldn't tell where it came from. And then I remembered the man on the opposite shore. No bag, no words, turning away. He could have circled the lake during the night and reached this side. I didn't panic. For some reason, I felt that if I panicked, I would lose. Quietly, I began packing my tent. The breathing continued. As I slung my backpack over my shoulder, there was a soft rustle in the forest, like a branch snapping or a deliberate step. I didn't turn around. I didn't run. I simply started walking toward the main trail. After a few steps, as if something had moved when I moved, the breathing stopped. Then, very close behind me, I heard a faint whisper. Not a word. Just a sound, as if someone were about to speak without opening their mouth. I kept walking, because now I understood something. This wasn't just a walk away from the lake. It was a test, to see whether I would be left alone or not. When I reached the trail, it was still dark, but the gaps between the trees guided me. There was no sound behind me. I kept walking. Eventually, the smell of the lake faded, that heavy metallic scent replaced by dry earth and frost. The ground grew firmer. Gravel crunched beneath the leaves. The path began to feel shaped by human hands. Still, I couldn't convince myself I was alone. Several times, I stopped to check whether the rhythm of footsteps was truly mine. When I stopped, the forest stopped too, as if everything held its breath with me. Hours later, the trees thinned. Asphalt appeared. A road. The first vehicle came much later, an old pickup truck. Its headlights blinded me. I raised my hand. It stopped. The window rolled down, and a middle-aged man looked me over. "Everything okay?" he asked. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I couldn't explain the truth. Even if I tried, who would it convince? "Yes," I said finally. "Just a long walk." He nodded. "Rough time of year," he said. "That area isn't very safe." Back in town, I asked about the lake at a small diner. I mentioned its name. The waitress hesitated. "People used to camp there," she said. "Not so much anymore. Strange things, especially near winter. Footprints, noises, nothing official. No one had a clear story. Just fragments. Sentences that ended with shrugs. I never went back. But sometimes, when the nights grow cold and I lie awake, one thought returns. That morning, when I left the lake, was I really alone? Or did someone walk with me until the road and only stop then? I don't know. And maybe as long as I don't know, I'm still safe.